Hi there, I'm Natanya, and today we're diving into a topic that's been a game changer for me: psychedelics. Let's start with a story, though. Okay, picture this: I'm in sunny Miami, and I've just come from freezing cold New Jersey, and I'm standing at the entrance of the Wonderland Conference. It was one of the largest psychedelic medicine events, and I was excited because the air was buzzing with anticipation. It was the first time I had ever been at an event like this. I was actually hosting one of the stages, and it just felt electric and alive. And all around me, people from every walk of life: medical professionals, scientists, artists, spiritual healers, tech enthusiasts, attorneys, insurance folks. Even the sort of festival goer curious civilians, if you will. There was glitter and fringe. It was quite a different set of clothings and suits that I packed compared to the traditional pharma and wellness conferences I had been to prior. um, Basically, I'd spent 2 decades in big pharma launching a lot of central nervous system or mental health products, chronic disease medicines in oncology and cancer and diabetes. And, you know, I was stepping into this new world, and it felt like I was teleported into another dimension. And by the way, this is while we are all, sober. This was a job. This was a research based event. But it was really different to me because it wasn't just the subject matter; it was the people, the subjects, and there was no PowerPoints in the same way as old. Even when sharing scientific information, there was so much more engagement and openness to different kinds of ways of thinking and treatment modalities, and Eastern traditions aligned with Western traditions. So I knew things were going to be different. And that started me on a path to a whole new world. So, anyway, I just wanted to share that excitement. And that was the beginning of my journey into the world of psychedelics, I guess, openly, but I had started a little before that. So, today I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've learned and am learning and share those things in case they might be of use or interest to you. And I want to be really clear: I am not a medical professional, I am not giving medical advice. I am not a licensed therapist currently. So all I'm sharing is things that I have researched or learned in my work, or anecdotally, or things that have worked for me in my journey to wellness and transformation, and all the alternative and integrative healing methods that I've been exposed to in my work. And so that if this resonates for you, I invite you to, try it, learn more yourself, talk to your medical professionals about what might be right for you. Hi there, welcome back. And I'm Natanya, your host, and we are talking today about psychedelics and mental health. And I wanted to talk a little bit about psychedelics because I personally was later exposed to some of these healing properties in these compounds. And honestly, there's a lot of stigma and bias, or bad reputation about these party drugs, as they have been called, or drugs actually. And I'd like to share what I've been learning about and seeing in terms of people having real healing, and try to have it be a little less controversial when people consider things that might work for them when they're working with their medical professionals. So I just want to break it down into some simple bits. And again, to articulate that I am not a licensed medical professional. These are my personal opinions from research and anecdotal experience. So please take it as such, and just sharing what I can to help everyone just feel a little better, walk a little lighter in their shoes. So, psychedelics like psilocybin and MDMA, they're emerging as groundbreaking tools in mental health. We've heard controversial stories, we've heard about risks, we've heard about benefits. I'm sure they're in the mainstream news, especially with some celebrities getting involved. And, just like anything else, these are things that need to be used with caution. An analogy that I often use, and it's not super elegant, but it's so simple. And I like it because it is so simple, and it is of fire. So when we think of fire and its impact on us as a species of humans, right, it's a pretty big deal. It's actually credited with advancing us as a species, and advancing our brains exponentially, because it offered so many new things for us in terms of how we live. Um, where we can get food and how we can prepare it, how we can cook it and have it for longer, how it will digest in our bodies, how we can fend ourselves off from wild animals or other threats in the night, to keep warm so we don't have to migrate, to gather around and have community, and now develop language and communication because we're sitting together around this fire. So fire unlocked a whole bunch of stuff for us as a species, but it also came with risk, right? So you can burn yourself, you can burn someone else, so it can be used as a weapon. It can be an accident, it can be on purpose, you know. So like anything else, psychedelics are powerful, incredible tools, but they need to be used with respect and caution. So I want to be clear. I also want to make another disclaimer, sorry, to say that although I say I left big pharma, there is still a very important role that pharmaceuticals play in many dimensions and aspects of our healing. And I'm not here to say what's good or bad or what's right or wrong and make those sweeping generalizations, and certainly not to disparage our institutions like hospitals and things like that. So I'm just saying that these are other ways, other tools that we could maybe use. And in America right now, many of them are considered what we call Schedule 4. And Schedule 4, unfortunately, is drugs like heroin and otherwise that are considered not having a medical benefit. Now, that is something that, if you've been following any of the news, is underway for consideration. And some people are hoping will change soon. But until such time, I want to be careful to mention a couple of these things before we get into it. So, anyway, there's been a lot of clinical research from institutions like Johns Hopkins, that many of you probably heard of, and show how these kind of compounds, these psychedelics, work in the brain and the body differently than the pharmaceutical products that are used today to treat things like depression and PTSD, and even things like schizophrenia and bipolar and those kinds of challenges that people struggle with, because these kinds of medicines unlock a different way of thinking and functioning in the brain that have been basically said to heal, right? Not necessarily just take your symptoms and make them less, but actually heal your trauma. And that part is what got me and what was really interesting. So when we look at, and again, my experience began when I was working with pharmaceutical products for PTSD with the military and PTSD situations, and looking at the data as it was coming into play that we were working with across the world. And we started seeing more and more data about soldiers reporting experiences in clinical settings with, physicians and therapists and trained people to do these psychedelic events. So that being said, and doing the work to prepare and then have the experience and then integrate their learning and understanding into their life. So it's not just take it and go. It is a process and a system. But they were having real healing for the first time in their lives. A soldier who dedicated his or her life to fight for us and our freedoms comes home from that experience and can't sleep through the night, or can't make love to their spouse, or function in their otherwise, daily life. And now all of a sudden, and they've tried maybe many, many medications, and they had some symptom relief, but they weren't really, really cured. They were still having their night sweats and night terrors, or they were still having panic moments, or hearing loud noises and setting in a nervous system response. So the thing that was really exciting is that they were reporting actual full relief of symptoms, and basically the closest thing we could say to cure. And these were sustained benefits, meaning they lasted for months at a time, or as long as the studies were going on. So that made me say, wow, what is going on here? And how is this happening? What's happening in the brain? What is the mechanism of action that these compounds are doing? What is changing? Why is this different? And it's really complicated and it's really simple. And I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you what I'm understanding. And what I'm understanding is we get our brains trained over the years to function and respond to stimuli, or, a thing in a certain way that becomes automatic. And in fact, it becomes almost not even conscious to us. So the older we are, the more those pathways of information, of cause and effect start to happen. And you get to a certain age and you're just sort of, this is who I am and this is how I react to these things. And what these medications or medicines or treatments can do is resend the signals in your brain in a new way, no matter how they've been going before. And what that means is something that automatically made you feel scared or anxious or excited can now be rerouted to a different set of cause and effect. And so that's a really, really exciting thing. And that fact that that can happen in one session. Now, that one session, like I said, needs preparation and integration, but in one session to heal you from a trauma that could have been decades or lifetimes long, well, that kind of sounds like magic to me. Let's take a pause here for a moment from our sponsors. And when we come back, we'll talk about what I've been seeing with individual people and how they have shared some really incredible stories. Join me in a wellness revolution, healing that starts within. Having overcome poor health myself, once bedridden and nearly 300 pounds, I know the power of true transformation. My journey wasn't about shortcuts, but about intentional, science-backed steps towards health, healing, and vitality. And that's why I'm thrilled to be a founding member of a wellness company that shares these values. This isn't just another brand, it's a movement. We're focused on healing from the inside out through clinically validated, doctor-endorsed products rooted in science, nature, and integrity. The solutions of 3 International are more than trends. They address the root causes of imbalance. Featured in the Physician's Desk reference, these products combine the best of nature and science. They've been life-changing for me, supporting my recovery from chronic illness to a life of health and purpose. This company stands for more than supplements. It's about creating a community and shifting wellness from quick fixes to sustainable change. With exciting developments ahead, we're building a revolution grounded in authenticity, empowerment, and results. If you're ready to transform your health, support a loved one, or align with a mission that truly makes a difference, now is the time to join me, and together we can rewrite the story of wellness and healing. Let's take this journey from the inside out together. Hi there. We're back. I'm Natanya Wachtel, and today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, psychedelics, and its properties and healing and the connection to things like nature and neurogenesis. So just as a little review, psychedelics are organic generally, not synthetic. And so they work with the brain's neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity means it's way of moving, growing, changing. And these are my neuron examples here. Very scientific lecture here, where we have information or stimulus that tingles or triggers the brain to start to build connections to other ideas and make more complex ideas and thoughts, and these things then become rooted and wired, and they help guide you in your daily life, and they also shape who you are or who you think you are in terms of your personality and things you sort of do without thinking, like how you respond to a certain color or person. And so in the healing process, unlike a lot of the medications that can mute things, like in mania, when someone is sort of very hyper perhaps or high energy, they can bring you down to calm down. Or if someone's in a deep depression where they can't get out of bed, they medications that are available can help get you out of bed, right? But they don't necessarily confront your actual pain and trauma, right? And so that kind of healing is where the breakthroughs are, and that's my interest in psychedelics, and that's what's been reported in clinical trials, with these products used, of course, appropriately and under clinical guidance. So the idea of healing with psychedelics is that we're just still learning, and we don't know how all of these things work. And these things do need to be done with caution, as I said earlier. But the exciting thing is that there are more trials, there are more states in this country that are allowing more trials to happen. And we have evidence from all over the world of trials, and we also have anecdotal. Which I still think are very valid stories of people who have gone in private settings, whether they be on retreats or within religious groups, um, from thousands of years of people using different kinds of psychedelics to expand their view of the world. And one of the basic kind of, woo woo things, but basic prime things that happens is people start to have a deeper connection with themselves and the universe and the rest of the world. And so, no matter your political or religious beliefs, these are things that sort of transcend all of those labels. They transcend culture. And what they do is they seem to help people, just like the way when you look at a beautiful nature, something like going to Yosemite or the Grand Canyon, or something that really just makes you go, wow, and gives you that sense of awe, that childlike, beautiful feeling of free connection to the universe, and feeling in some ways very small but part of something larger. That's what most people who have experienced these psychedelic healing journeys talk about, that they give you that. And when you have that, those little things in life that irritate you, like traffic or maybe a coworker that's irritable, they just seem to bother people a little less, and they keep people in that openness to the wonders of the world, that childlike wonder that gives us that uplifted feeling. And that's where maybe the hormones that dopamine and all the kind of good feeling good hormones kind of have, that's kind of how it all works together and resets you into a new way of being. And that's pretty magical stuff. So that's one reason that I'm advocating for all of this, because I've seen people who have been really struggling deeply for a long time. We have areas of, especially when we think about combined things, like if you're suffering chronic pain or if you're struggling with addiction. So those things layered on top of mental health. And that's where some of the really exciting data is coming in psychedelics in the Western world. But we've had the data as well for thousands of years about these treatments. And so now it's really, really great to see more people talking about this and bringing it into their life. But I do want to say again that integrating what you experience and learn with a professional into your life, so that you can actually take steps to live a little bit differently, to maybe approach some things differently. That's really important. And it's also no small thing. So the other thing that happens, and we're going to take a break in a minute, but we're going to shift to talk about what happens when you have one of these experiences and now you see the world differently. What do you do now? And so it's a big topic. So we're going to take a break and listen to our sponsors and come back to that in just a moment. Hi there, welcome back. I'm Natanya Wachtel, and today we are talking about psychedelics. And we've talked a little bit about what they are and how they work a little bit. And we've said some cautionary things as well. But I'd like to close out with a little bit of caution around how these are, although they feel like magic, and I do think they are magic, but there is proper guidance that's involved. And you can. There are two things I want to say. A lot of people ask about or are afraid about the thing called a bad trip. And so, again, what we've been really careful about here is cautioning people to connect with a medical professional or someone trained in psychedelic assisted therapy. So it could be, you know, someone to sit with, or medical professionals in clinical trials, or others who offer services to help you understand how to prepare, but also make sure you've had a full psychiatric evaluation to make sure there's nothing going on that maybe you weren't aware of. And this is really important because the bad trip often happens for a combination of reasons, and quite frankly, more likely statistically, and again, this isn't a genetic predisposition, but it often is with men, and that is because, and no one will probably be shocked, again, this is anecdotal, but generally to say that sometimes there's unresolved things that men are not as typically um, expressing in our Western society, so that they have a lot of unresolved and maybe even unknown things that they're struggling with that are kind of pushed down really deep down. And so because the psychedelics essentially are, and again, I'm using um, figurative language here, but they are unlocking your brain and mind and body pathways that are going to have you see things from all different angles. Well, if you have a lot of stuff that's traumatic that you haven't dealt with or processed, that's going to come up. Now, if you have someone to help you through that, you're going to work through that, see it in a new way, and ultimately kind of have it in the rearview mirror. And that's one of the great stories of it. But you also need to have it happen in an environment that's safe and soothing. And so, taking a bunch of psychedelics without supervision, without any sense of, who you are and what's been going on with you, and then going to a place where there's like a lot of aggressive, loud stimulation, or like a biker gang meeting, those kinds of moments, which nothing against that, but just to say, it's not going to put you in the most relaxed state. So when you are confronted with something that might be a little frightening, it's going to accelerate that and give you more fear. So I just want to caution that, you know, yes, of course there's risk. These are very powerful, powerful things that you can put in your body to heal you in a very powerful way. But if you're not doing it cautiously and with the right supervision, there is some risk. So we want to just talk about that. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is if everything goes really well, but you've had a radical change, people are going to notice. And some people are not going to like it. Just like with anything, especially we see a lot of parallels in addiction recovery, right? Where once you have a new way that you want to be for yourself, you're going to have differences in your behaviors, in your choices in life, and the people in your life may or may not still work in your new way of being, and or they might not support that, or they might not understand that. And so that's really important to think about and be prepared for, because you might want to do a different job. You might need to get different friends. You might need to take a hard look at some of the things you've said and done that you're not so proud of, but you don't want to let them define you. And, that's another big message here, is that I think that everyone can kind of be whatever they want to be, and that your story isn't necessarily finished, no matter how old you are, that you can kind of shift into a new way of being, and it can be quite liberating, and quite frankly give you the best second chapter of your life. So I'm obviously a big advocate, but with responsibility. So we're going to pause here for a moment, because I want to talk about some of the people who have been writing to me and sharing their stories and questions about psychedelics. So when we come back, we're going to dive into that. Stay tuned. Hi there, welcome back. I'm Natanya Wachtel, and today we've been talking about psychedelics. And I wanted to go into a little bit of feedback from some of our listeners that I've been getting. And again, these are just high level clips, and we encourage you to send in any questions or comments to see if we can help. We are just really excited to learn as much as we can about everyone's stories and healing and struggles, and so that we can all kind of share and grow and get stronger together. So I have a question from someone called Alex in Portland. And Alex said, Natanya, I've been struggling with treatment resistant depression for years, and I've heard about psilocybin assisted therapy, but I'm really scared of having a bad trip. And this is something we talked about in the earlier segment. What advice would you give me to avoid that? And that's partly why I wanted to talk about that earlier, because I got many, many, many messages from people like Alex. And so I thank you, Alex, for your courage in sharing that. And so I want to be clear, I cannot give medical advice, but I can share some insights in what I've understood. And again, bad trips often reflect unresolved emotions and not the substance that you're putting into your body itself. And so when you work with a trained professional, a licensed professional or clinic that's offering these therapies, perhaps it's a protocol that might work. They often do something like in ketamine therapy, they start you on a very, very, very small dose to kind of see how you respond. So you can kind of have a few essentially trial experiences to just kind of deal with anything that might come up. And that way, it's sort of a gentle introduction and it won't have the same risks of being emotionally overwhelmed. But if you're really curious, I would say start with research. And when I say research, I don't mean you need a college degree or graduate degree to do research. You can use the interwebs, if you will, but I encourage you to do things. Um, look for things that are as unbiased as possible. And that means from any agenda, political or otherwise. And maybe look at people's personal stories and things like that. There is a great set of shows now on all the streaming channels and some public. There's Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind, one of my personal favorites, Fantastic Fungi, featuring Paul Stamets and a bunch of other incredible pioneers, um, psychonauts, if you will, in these journeys who talk about what it's like. Of course, Shane Moss, who I'm proud to know and got to present with at that conference. He's a comedian and openly has specials about what it was like for him in his psychedelic and medication journeys and mental health. There's lots of exercises you can do, like journaling, where you can take your hopes and fears and that kind of stuff for yourself and just kind of start to connect with what is going on with yourself. And that can be a great tool to kind of complement a psychedelic experience or even preparing for one. Um, I challenge you to think about maybe doing some brain health basics, right? These are not really cool, but they do really work. And they are these. Maybe try and get a little more sleep and look at the quality of your sleep. Making sure that you're actually hydrated, thinking about your digestive system and your gut. What are you putting into your body? And all these things work together and give you your ultimate response to anything, whether that be taking a walk or taking a psychedelic journey. So we just wanted to give very high level overview today of psychedelics, what they are, how you can use them to heal potentially, and what are some of the controversies and risks and watchouts. And we're just so excited that more people are looking to learn about these ancient medicines and treatments and tools, and hopefully that more of us can be a little bit more happy to be here together in this crazy world. I don't know what else to say, Ryan. I have one more thing to say. So we'll cut that part, right? Okay. Can I say my closing? I had a closing. I love like, oh, I like what I wrote. Okay. So we've covered a lot today from my sort of early days on the scene in psychedelics and the science behind why, they are revolutionary. And so my takeaway for you is that healing is possible, even if you felt stuck for years. And it might look different than you imagined. It might be a mushroom, it might be meditation, it might be yoga. But the key is really just having the courage to want more for yourself and the curiosity to explore maybe different things. And to remember, I'm not here to prescribe anything to you or recommend any specific treatment, but I am here to share what's inspired me, what I've seen people heal with. And it's always important to consult with a medical professional before you try anything new. And remember that we're all in this together and we're not all so different. And I'm really excited to connect with you today. And please, please continue to write to us and share your stories. Together, we're going to all do this just a little bit better. Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Natanya Experience. Today, we are talking about psychedelics. And unlike sometimes my format where we do interviews, today we are just going to hear from me a little bit and sharing some of the basic backgrounds. Because as we talk with guests in the upcoming weeks about their psychedelic experiences, we thought it would be good to have a little bit of background on what it's all about, what are the risks and watchouts, and why am I so excited about it. So stay tuned for more. And we'll also hear from one of our listeners who wrote in a question. And we're really just excited to kind of break open all the myths, stigma, trauma details that you can and get people a little more curious or open minded to some more tools in the toolbox as we address things like mental health and addiction with psychedelics. At the Natanya Experience, we believe we can all rise above challenges, heal, and shine together. And so we give big thanks to our amazing partners who share our vision of universal health and happiness.